Our special guest on the Shed Online today is multiple Australian racing champion and former V8 supercar driver and Beyond Blue ambassador, John Bowe. We're talking to John at Phillip Island Racetrack, where it's particularly chilly and rainy today. John's competing in the Touring Car Masters for pre-1974 vehicles. Last year, JB reached the milestone of 40 years in motorsport, which is quite some achievement. So John, how did you first get into racing, and could you give us a bit of an overview of your career?
I grew up in it. To be honest, like a kid would grow up in a football family, I grew up in a racing family. My dad raced, and he was a mechanic, and he worked on other people's cars, and our garage was always full of cars of some description, particularly in the 60s. It was like MGs and Austin Healey's and things like that. So I was just a rev head basically, and I think I wanted to. I'm not sure I really was ever intent on having a career in motorsport, but I wanted to race. So when I started racing when I was 15. I actually put my age up, which you could do then because no one asked for birth certificates, where now you can't do that.
What kind of personality do you need to be a race driver?
It's a lot of things. Driving a race car there are many sorts of race cars obviously, but driving a race car well requires a lot of different things, and it's balance and depth perception and finesse, and it's really, I wouldn't have a clue, and I've been doing it a long time.
You were born with some natural ability?
I think there's a certain amount of it comes naturally, yes. I would say, if you ask me a percentage, I'd say probably 75% of it has to be in you somehow, and then the rest you can refine, so you can learn lots about it, particularly modern day cars, with like this particular car has a lot of data acquisition. A V8 supercar has a lot of data acquisition, so you can have an engineer or a data person that will explain what you're not doing right and how you can improve your performance. So that's science. With my old Mustang, there's no data acquisition, there's nothing, and you basically wing it, which is what people used to do in the 60s and the 70s. You drive to the way you feel. So
I guess you think about the risk involved. How do you manage that? How do you deal with the risks?
When you drive yourself, you are in charge of it. So I'm not saying you don't make mistakes. You do make mistakes, but it's measured in a sense that you drive it to your ability. So your touch, feel, depth perception, aggressiveness or passiveness, whatever. It's your choice. You do it yourself. So. And I've been doing it so long, it's quite normal to me, it's quite natural to me. I wouldn't say I don't get a buzz out of it, because I do. It's adrenalising as a sport, but it's not the speed per se in motor racing that's thrilling. It's the control of the car, the battle with other people. I find it challenging to be able to drive the car and analyse the car and use your brain all at the same time. I think that's part of what I still do it for, basically.
So, John, tell us a bit about this flash automobile behind you.
Well, it's a Ferrari 458, which is the latest model mid-engine Ferrari. It's a GT3 car, which is a world category, so it exists in America, Europe, England, Australia, Asia. It's quite a well-regulated category, so it's quite successful on a world basis. I don't drive this regularly. A friend of mine, Peter Edwards, owns the car. It's run by Maranello Motorsport, and a few weeks ago, I've driven it with Peter before at the Bathurst 12 Hour. A few weeks ago they asked me if I'd share it with him here. There's 2 one-hour races, so I thought it was a good idea at the time, but now the weather's like this, I'm not so sure it was a good idea.
You're an ambassador for Beyond Blue. How did that come about, and what's your story?
During the course of 2006-07, I was coming to an end of a professional career which had lasted 25 years, so quite a long time, and unusual for sport. And I was feeling pretty down about it all, but I wouldn't say I was depressed. And I went to see a couple of clinical psychologists, and in some ways they helped. And I remember them saying, a lot of professional athletes feel like this, which doesn't really do you any good, because knowing someone else feels like it doesn't make you feel any better. So Slowly, when I explain it to someone, it's like layers of lasagna. You know, you get layers and layers and layers of it on you, and eventually you're depressed. You know, you're not depressed to start with. You might be a bit down the dumps about it, or you have trouble dealing with it, or you have trouble accepting it. But eventually it leads to depression, which it did with me, and it was just dreadful. It's the most, you know, debilitating, frightening, awful thing that I've ever had anything to do with. There's plenty of people that that say to you, and these are well-meaning people, you know, get out of it, like pull yourself through or get on with life or whatever, but when it gets a hold of you, it's very difficult. You certainly can't ignore it, you know. I mean, I ignored it for quite a long time, and it gets more and more of a hold on you, so you can't ignore it. You've got to do something about it.
What advice do you have for people who might be facing tough times themselves?
The first thing you have to do is you've got to go to your doctor, your family doctor, or your GP or whatever, and talk to them about it. And GPs are like mechanics, there's good and bad. So, you know, if you get a bad one, you've got to go to another one. You know, a lot of people are anti-medication. I think you do whatever you can do. And in my case, a particular medication helped me quite a lot. But I tried 3 or 4 different medications before it had a positive effect. The bottom line, I guess, and the key point is you've got to seek some help. You've got to get some help.
John, you've been an absolute champion. Thanks for sharing your story with us today on The Shed Online. Now, how about we go and have a look at that Mustang?
I'd love to take you. Let's go and have a look.